Good morning, and thank you for joining the Michigan Chamber Foundation in our first Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion webinar of 2024, where we're coming together to explore and champion the importance of diversity inclusion in the workplace. Today, we will learn from a leader in the field about how fostering environments where every individual, regardless of their abilities, feels valued, empowered, and fully included. Disability inclusion is a powerful strategic component of workforce development and also recognizes that this goes beyond compliance with laws and regulations. It's about fostering a culture of belonging where every person can bring their whole self to work and where differences are not only accepted but celebrated. Through engaging discussions, shared experiences, and insightful takeaways, we aim to deepen our understanding of the challenges faced by individuals with disabilities in the workplace and explore actionable strategies to dismantle barriers and create pathways for meaningful inclusion. Please use our chat box and Q&A option throughout the webinar. Time will be made at the end of the event to discuss the questions you have and allow you to engage with our guests today. Our programming would not be possible without our incredible sponsors, and I would like to express our heartfelt gratitude to the sponsors who have generously supported this event. Their unwavering commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion has made this panel a reality, allowing us to come together to address these pressing issues. We extend our deepest thanks to Dow Chemical for supporting our series as a platinum sponsor, CATA for engaging as a bronze sponsor, and for the Michigan Bankers Association and the Michigan Bankers Workers Compensation Fund for joining us as bronze sponsors as well. We truly appreciate your commitment to fostering a more inclusive and equitable workplace and are so glad to invite you all to join today. Together, let us challenge some assumptions, break down stereotypes, and pave the way to look beyond labels. In this space, all voices are heard, all talents are recognized, and all individuals will thrive. Today, we will hear from Disability Network of Michigan in a fireside chat with Stephen Clark, who is a fierce advocate and has deep roots in this space. With that, I will turn it over to Stephen Clark to kick off our event and get this conversation started.
Unmute, hold on a sec. I'm unmuted now. Perfect. My name is Stephen Clark. I was a television news anchor at Channel 7 Detroit for about 17 years, retired in 2018, did a couple of years on WOMC radio, and have since moved to Fort Myers Beach, Florida, where I'm a full-time musician, and also trying to repair my house from hurricane damage that we suffered about 18 months ago. So if you hear occasional pounding and drilling going on, I've got a new front stair going on right now to repair the one damaged in the hurricane. So I hope that doesn't offend you on the construction noise. Now, the reason why I'm a fierce advocate for the subject that we're discussing today, my granddaughter, Scarlett, 11 years old, she was born with spinal muscular atrophy, which has left her in a wheelchair. So we were suddenly immersed into this world of accessibility and inclusion. Suddenly, I mean, it just happened to us, and we had to kind of learn as we go along. But one of our first big forays into the world was when we took Scarlett to a playground in the Detroit metro area that was billed as barrier-free inclusive. We got there, and sure enough, her playground was very barrier-free and had some great equipment on it for her to play on. The problem was it was not very inclusive because it was about 100 yards away from the big playground where all the other kids were. So in subsequent investigation into why that was, we found out that the thinking in the community at that time was, well, we don't want the kids who are disabled to get hurt while playing with kids who are not disabled. And we thought, well, you don't understand how hurtful it was for her to sit and watch all these other kids playing on a playground. So my wife and I decided to do what we could to try to fix that. We raised about $1.5 million and built what is probably the most inclusive barrier-free playground in America. It's called Scarlett's Playground in Commerce Township, right by the new library. So if you get a chance to go see that, you'll understand what I'm talking about. So anyway, that is why I'm included here, because it's near and dear to my heart because of my granddaughter. And she has a future that I'll talk a little bit about when I'm in the discussion here coming up that really begs for not only accessibility, but inclusion and understanding on people's parts. So I'm going to get with the program here now. That's enough about what I've been up to here. And I'd like to introduce to you Terry Langley, the Executive Director of the Disability Network Michigan. Now, I've been reading up a little on Terry here also, and and definitely we're on the same page here. So I'm really happy, and I have not had a chance yet talk at great length to Terry. So let's get going, Terry. First of all, thank you so much for joining us today.
Good morning,
First
Stephen.
question
Thank
is,
you.
what is it you guys do at the Disability Network of Michigan?
That's a great question, Stephen. At Disability Network Michigan, we represent the state's 15 Centers for Independent Living, and Centers for Independent Living are federally mandated resource organizations that are all over the state of Michigan. We're in all 83 counties for services, and we're regional. So if someone is in the UP, then we'll direct them to the Superior Alliance for Independent Living, which is in the UP. She covers the entire Upper Peninsula. We have centers in Wayne County, Detroit. We also have Oakland Macomb Township, the Thumb area, Jackson, Lenawee. You get the picture. We have 15 centers that service all 83 counties. Resources for people with disabilities and for people without disabilities who are caring for friends or caring for loved ones. And so we are purely resources. We do provide services, peer counseling, independent living skills, basically life skills. Our main mission is to keep people in their homes, whether they are with a disability at birth, throughout their life, or age into a disability. And we do diversion programs to keep people out of nursing homes and assisted living if that's not their choice. At the heart of what we do is to honor the person's individual choices about their own medical care, their own, living environments.
Now, what the Michigan Chamber is doing today is really kind of aimed at businesses, trying to get us all in the right space on what we need to make happen in the future. Now, I think there are two aspects of this, and this is what I've discovered, is that first of all, there's the physical aspect of a workplace that is accessible. And then as I go back to my story about the playground, there's also inclusion, which is not a physical thing. It's how people see what's going on, how they interpret the needs of people who need this access. So does the Disability Network make that distinction between physical and attitudinal?
Absolutely. One of the things that Disability Network is, charged of is meeting with policymakers on the local, state, and federal level to make sure that any policies that are put in place, have that accessibility and inclusion in mind. So one of the mantras that you'll hear often is nothing about us without us. One of my main criteria is to put people with disabilities at the tables where these conversations are happening. And we serve all disabilities, physical, cognitive, anyone that has a disability, whether visible or invisible, is welcome to contact our Center for Resources. We have a strong advocacy program. We are required by federal law to have 51% or more staff of the centers that have disabilities. That is a federal mandate. Excuse me. And the importance of that is to make sure that, those with lived experiences are able to educate and raise awareness on the importance of inclusion and accessibility.
Now, I'll get to this idea of this visible and invisible in just a minute. But first of all, the thing I have found, my wife and I have found in approaching people about this issue of accessibility and inclusion is that the thought process seems to me leans towards, oh, well, we have to do that. We're required to do that. So let's do it. Is that the right way of thinking, or should this be something that that comes naturally to an organization? Not that we have to do it, but that we should do it.
It's a great question, and that is part of our mission as well, as having as many conversations as we possibly can to raise awareness that we should do it. The legal requirements are the bare minimum, and our communities, our state, our world prospers when we do more than just the bare minimum. You've had your own experience with what inclusivity looks like versus what it actually is, and that's what we do. We spend our time educating people on, I know you use the word inclusive, but your practice doesn't reflect the true meaning of inclusivity.
and I'll get back to this visible and invisible, because I find it funny, if nothing else. Scarlett is in a wheelchair, and she has muscle issues, so she's not able to like raise up her hands and wave and things like that. And people will approach her and they'll start speaking loudly and slowly, and they don't realize they're talking to a little girl who's probably smarter than they are and probably more articulate than they are. But they just make the assumption she's in a chair, so therefore she is multi-hindered. How do you overcome that? How do you get people to understand that this because you look something you're not, and because you don't look something you might be?
My answer to that is having these conversations like we are today, and having as many as possible, and talking to people who have that lived experience. So, I'm not sure how old Scarlett is now, but as she ages, she's going to want to have those conversations. She's going to want to welcome people to talk to her and not make assumptions about the disability. I do hear that often. I have been in situations where I've seen people talk louder, just not intent. I don't want to say it's intentionally to be offensive, but they don't know. And one of the things that I take into this job is, when we know better, we do better. I'm very fond of Maya Angelou, and that's a quote that I completely, take into my work. And it is also seen as unconscious bias. And what I strive to do, and what our centers strive to do, is to make sure that we can just educate you. I take it from the frame of mind of, I don't want to be forceful, but I also want to be meaningful. I will always come to the table with a conversation assuming positive intent, and making sure that you are not already on the defense of, thinking all the worst things. That's what we seem to run into, right? Is that people think all the worst things when it comes to conversations about disabilities. And one of the things I'm excited about this morning is just being able to have that informal conversation and talk about what we're fearful of. People who don't have that lived experience, they don't know anybody that's had that lived experience, often make, mistakes sounds a little too rough, but often make mistakes when it comes to interacting with people with disabilities. And the more we have these conversations, the easier it is for them to see that they don't have to think so hard about it. I think people tend to think so hard about not offending that they actually do come off offending. It's all about education.
Well, we're in a culture, though, as you understand, it's this cancel culture. And so people are worried that, what am I supposed to say? Am I supposed to? And I worry about it sometimes. And I say, I should get a pass at least a little bit. But I worry, is it differently abled? Is it disabled? Is it, we have this whole new set of lingo that I think starts scaring people. They're afraid they've used the old term when they should have used a new term that they didn't get the memo on. So when you now go into businesses, for instance, since we're still kind of like aiming at businesses right now, how would you go into a business and say, okay, how do we start this process? Wipe all the preconceptions off the table, and how do we start clean and new so we get this working?
I think that, what you have to do is you have to assess the room, right? You have to read the room and see, who you're dealing with and what you're dealing with. And it starts with a conversation. So our centers also do provide those trainings for employers on the accommodations, what to make sure you have, that are all of those training. They deal with things that are above and beyond the ADA. So most HR professionals are trained in what, is required by the ADA. And again, that's the bare minimum. So when our center staff have these trainings, they start, they'll assess, what are you looking for? What is it that you need help with? And then they'll go from there. But it starts with a conversation, and it starts with getting to know the person. And, it truly starts with the business wanting to change their culture, and not just, follow ADA minimum requirements.
So give me an example of a business that you have run across personally that has made that leap, has made that change, and is, in your opinion, on the right track and doing the right things. Give me a look at what they're doing.
Okay. One of the ones that I know personally is the Meyer Corporation here in Michigan. They're a beloved, grocery chain, and they have an internal DEI team. And when I first took this job, I reached out to them knowing that, they had that team, and, talked a little bit about what they were doing. They've created a culture where disability is, and their culture is inclusive. People of, every walk of life, every experience is included in their culture. So it's a volunteer team, which is amazing. And it speaks to Meyer's dedication to making sure that their employees are seen and heard. And, one of the things I like to tell businesses is that when you have employees that feel seen and heard, you will often have customers that feel seen and heard, because they see themselves represented in the employees that are there. And Meyer has been recognized nationally for being an inclusive employer for several years now.
Well, you mentioned one benefit that the customers see the employees and feel included. What other benefits can you convince a business that they get from making sure they have a good system to hire people that would normally not get hired in jobs? Because I know businesses are saying, well, yeah, we're going to do this because I guess it's the right thing to do. What benefits do they really get? I mean, what can you say? Well, no, it's better than that, and you actually benefit from it.
The benefits are plentiful. You have a more positive work environment. You have people who are learning about other people. You are stressing that this is how we want to be, and this is, you put good out into the world, and you start with the internal makings of your company. You have a more positive environment. You are seen as a leader in your community. And you're seen as a leader in the disability community, as someone, that doesn't see the disability and sees the person. The benefits far outweigh any costs, which we know are minimal, and we can get to that later. But it is about the culture, and then when more companies are participating in this, it's a trickle effect. We hope that it falls out into the community, and we hope that it falls out into the municipalities. Yeah. So for your experience that you shared, surrounding companies will help bring inclusivity to those communities where parks are not inclusive, but we've got these leaders on the municipal boards and, county boards making decisions based on the culture that surrounds them.
I was going to point out another benefit that I've seen. I have a friend from Commerce whose adult daughter has worked at Kroger for I don't know how many years she's been there. She's been there forever. And you don't get that loyalty in a lot of employees these days.
That's right. That's right. That is another benefit, is loyalty. So, and this goes for, across the board, when you feel taken care of, or when you feel seen or heard in your employment, you tend to stay with that company. When you're happy, you stay. And that goes without saying for the disability community as well. It truly is a rippling effect across the company.
I want to go back to the Meyer, because we got a lot of reaction when you started talking about Meyer, because definitely people recognize them as a company that is doing many of the right things. So one of the questions that came up during that conversation is, what does Meyer do to help people feel included? On the recruitment side, how can we adjust job postings and systems to be more inclusive, invite more people who live with disabilities to apply? So here's somebody who has a business that wants to be like Meyer. How do you go about doing that?
The first thing I would do is definitely encourage them to contact a Center for Independent Living that's in their area. We've got staff that are trained to be able to walk them through those conversations. And then, I would also encourage them to talk to people with disabilities, which again, they'll get at the Center for Independent Living, because we have staff with lived experiences. But in order for your business to thrive and change the culture and truly create not only diversity, equality, and inclusion, but also belonging, you have to talk to the people that are living with disabilities. You cannot have a conversation about themes without those people who are actually affected by it. So that would be my very first, step. I would encourage any business in the state of Michigan to contact their local Center for Independent Living.
Now, when you're looking at a company who wants to get more involved in this, do you recommend start at the top and get just like a leadership team that deals with you to kind of learn this, or is this something you should open up to your entire staff and say, have a big seminar and say, hey, we're going to all sit here and we're going to listen to what we all should be doing? Is this something that you would think is better aired widely, or should you start at the top of the pyramid?
I think it depends on I do think it depends on the corporate structure, the company structure. I think if you are a small business, I would say, anyone in that small business should take the idea to the decision makers. And, from that, once you receive that training, then yes, open it up and have a company-wide or a business-wide employee, conversation. Some of the things, outside of Centers for Independent Living, there's a, job accommodation network website that's available to employers and individuals, and they walk you through the steps of, similar training that our SIL staff will do. They provide accommodation, answers for frequently asked questions, things of that nature. But again, back to your question, I think it depends on the company structure. And definitely at some point in the process, you do need to bring in all of your employees and have a conversation. And I know when I first spoke to the chamber, my interest is smaller conversations breed bigger changes. And so when you have these conversations and you talk about inclusivity, talk about what it means, talk about, how you're going to make changes within your business and and bring people in. It's truly about making people feel seen and heard. So there was a recent study done that only 39% of people with disability, employees with disabilities, disclose those disabilities. And you have to ask yourself, why? Is it the culture? Do they not feel comfortable? Are they afraid of recourse because they didn't disclose it during their interview, which is not required? Things of that nature. It's truly about creating a culture, even outside businesses, where we can have conversations about disabilities and not feel uncomfortable. And I do agree with you 100% that language is important, and it is inevitable that you will step in it by using the wrong term, especially because times change and language changes. Yes. But I also ask for grace when we are all from the Disability Network talking to people and trying to raise awareness. Have grace, because this is a teachable moment, and you can either excite them to want to have the further conversation, or you can shut them down because now they're either embarrassed or it's too much or anything like that. So that is truly, one of the things that I strive is to make sure that you are having grace when trying to educate anyone, but specifically about the challenges with creating inclusivity in communities and businesses.
Well, let's look into that more. You brought it back up again. It's something I brought up, is the cancel culture. We're so afraid of saying the wrong thing. So I know around my daughter, some of a granddaughter, I don't know exactly what I'm supposed to say either. The word disability, for instance, and sometimes people say, well, she's not disabled, she's just otherly able. Okay, I get it. So what do you suggest? And this is a question coming from people watching this seminar right now who are perhaps thinking, okay, we want to get involved in this. What language do we use? What do we say? What is the correct thing to say? And I know you're saying have a little grace and stuff, but I think people need some guidance on where do they start on this.
Absolutely. So I have only been in this role about 3 years. And when I was first hired, I stepped in it all the time. My colleagues and directors, gave me grace and just, let me know that, we don't like to say this word. We don't like to use this word. My best advice for anyone is to simply ask. When you're talking with someone who has a disability, ask them, how do you like to be identified? Because right now, even in the disability community, there are different schools of thought. There are people who lead with their, identify with their disability and say they're disabled. And then there are people who don't and say they have a disability. And so you can imagine how confusing that is. But the simple way to break through that is to ask questions. Someone with a disability is definitely wanting and willing to help educate and spread awareness on how to interact with their community.
I know with my granddaughter, we call her handy capable. That seemed to have been taking the terms and making the best of them. What do you? I want to go back because I never kind of got to the end of this answer. The misconceptions in the workplace of people who do have these situations, these disabilities. What is the misconception if you're an owner? You're saying, hey, listen, money's tight. I can't just afford to hire somebody just to fill a spot. I need to get work out of this person. They're assuming this person doesn't work.
Yes, that is one of the misconceptions, that they don't want to work, that they would rather collect government assistance, that it's going to be expensive to hire someone with a disability. And we all know what people say about people that make assumptions. Until you don't know facts. And so that's part of the training as well, is making sure that people understand that accommodations exist already for people without disabilities. So when someone calls in sick, that's an accommodation. Right. So I think the word accommodation scares employers because of the misconceptions. Again, going back to, it's going to be expensive. I'm going to have to change my entire, footprint of my business, structurally, things like that. And so the more they know, the better they do. And it is just truly trying to break through those misconceptions. I would say cost is one of the biggest ones. Right. A misconception is this person's only going to want to work remotely. That's not always true. There are people who want to work. And again, independent living means caring for themselves and also supporting themselves. They want to work. And we have an untapped resource. People with disabilities, are smart. They are, knowledgeable in their industry. They are problem solvers. I mean, think about it. Think about what happens when you have a disability, whether it's, permanent or acute. You break your leg, you are disabled, but you're pivoting, you're creating, other opportunities to use without that leg. And that's a very minimum example I can give you, but there are accommodations already being made in the workplace. And I think it's about expanding. It truly is expanding your thought processes, and how to incorporate people with disabilities into your business culture.
We talked a little bit about Meyer, but I also want to just get more into it. The recruitment process. Okay, you decided as a business, we really do want to jump into this for the right reasons. So how do we go about identifying the candidates who are right for our business, and our business is right for them?
So you start with the job posting. Make sure your job posting is accessible and it lists the accessibility challenges that may occur with this job. Right now, you'll see a standard job posting that says must lift at least 25 pounds, et cetera. But if you're truly looking to be inclusive, you need to include more details, such as, are there elevators where your, business exists? If there are stairs, those types of accessibility challenges that exist. Making sure that if you're wanting to be so widespread, making sure that your job posting that's on the website is an accessible website, for people to be able to, see that. We have some auditory disabilities. Make sure that someone can access your website if they don't have vision, things of that nature. That's where it starts, the job posting.
Do you suppose the businesses are just afraid of the expense? I mean, because you do have to readjust not only your thinking, but your physical space. Sometimes you have to absolutely rebuild your business in order to make this accommodation, and it is an accommodation. Are businesses afraid of that, or is that a payoff that they need to look at for the future?
I do think in the initial setting, I do think that businesses are afraid of the cost, but I think once they're having the conversation, their reality becomes, this isn't cost, prohibitive at all. This is minimal costs. And I guess I don't disagree that someone would have to change their entire footprint to allow for an accommodation. We're talking, even now businesses are making the change from non-ergonomic equipment to ergonomic equipment. If it's a desk sitting, they've got ergonomic mice for computers, things of that nature.
Mhm.
So again, we're talking about accommodations that are already existing that people don't know are accommodations. And I would definitely disagree that it's not cost prohibitive. Any cost, of course, if you're talking about, making a wider space, that doesn't exist, that, is all intensive, that's not what I'm usually talking about, though. And
Right.
again, I would encourage businesses to truly take a look at their, footprint, and do that with someone who has the expertise. Again, staff at our centers are trained in accessibility, requirements, and also above and beyond. Universal design is something that we talk about a lot. Universal design is inclusive, and it is something that is beneficial from the ground up. So when you build with universal design, particularly with houses, I know we're talking about businesses right now, but houses,
Right.
you don't have to change that footprint when you age into a disability, or if you have something happen in your life where a disability occurs. So in your case, Stephen, not knowing that you would have a granddaughter born with a disability,
Right.
universal design would already accommodate that. I can speak from
Right.
personal experience. When my husband and I purchased our current house, we made sure that the house would be a place that we could age into. And so similarly, which means, master, main bath, main bedroom,
Mhm.
laundry room are all on the first floor, with no stairs to have to access them. Similar to businesses, um, you new businesses have better advantage, but even current businesses, there's a lot of opportunity. And I think when you have that conversation with people who have the lived experience and can look at it through the disability experience, businesses will be surprised in the best way that it's not going to be cost prohibitive.
I know our house in Commerce Township that we were in when Scarlett was born was not. It was, fortunately, it was mainly a one floor home, but it was not. It didn't have ramps. We had stairs and all this kind of thing that we had to get around. So we had to get portable ramps, which we found, and were able to put them places where we could move them away when we needed to. The house we're in Florida, that was number one on our list of things to look for, was an elevator. Because here you've got to be up off the ground anyway. You have to. Stairs are inescapable here, but we do have an elevator, and we got that on purpose just because we knew that. That's a house. If you have a business, obviously there are ADA requirements that needed to have already been addressed or should be addressed. But we'll move past that for right now, because I did want to ask you a question. You reminded me of something. You said you've been at it for 3 years now at the Disability Network. What changes have you personally seen in attitudes and in action in those 3 years?
So, personally, I can tell you that my family has become more educated, more aware of how to interact with people with disabilities, what to look for. So I remember my first 6 months on the job, my husband and I would be out in the communities, and I would point to inaccessible places, the curbs, things of that nature. And when I would tell my husband about it, he would say, I've never seen that, but now that's all we see. So
Yeah.
when we go to businesses, it actually makes me very happy when he will tell me, oh, by the way, I was at such and such, and they have some issues. I can tell you, in the last 6 months, I went to a restaurant and noticed that they have an upstairs room. And this, actually, I witnessed this, so this was a little disheartening for me. They have a room on the second floor that it appeared the only access was by stairs. And when I say it appeared, is because I overheard the conversation of someone who actually was on crutches, who needed to get to the second floor room because they had an event going on. And the hostess told them there was no other way to get up there. And so that
Hmm.
to me just made me realize how much more work needs to be done. I can also tell you that professionally, when I talk to legislators and policymakers, their eyes and ears are open to hearing from everybody, and specifically the disability community. So when I have these conversations about accessibility and the importance of independent living, you know, they're all on board. They understand the value and the value of the investment of independent living. It keeps people, you know, working. It keeps people contributing to the economy, and
Hmm.
you know, they see the value in that. So professionally and personally, I've seen quite a bit of changes in my 3 years, but I can tell you the work's not done. And
Hmm.
I proudly work with the Centers for Independent Living and all that they do to better their communities. They are some of the hardest working people out there trying
Hmm.
to make their communities better. And it starts with trying to get the communities to understand what it means to be inclusive. I was very inspired to hear your story, Stephen, because that's exactly what we're trying to do across Michigan is educate and raise awareness on this. You're saying this is inclusive, but let me tell you what inclusivity really means and looks
Right.
like.
Yeah. Because I think in the case of the playground, nobody, I think, asked anybody, okay, we're building an inclusive playground, but is it inclusive or is it exclusive? Which is
Exactly.
in our case. Now, forgive me for not knowing the answer to this, but I'm going to ask the question anyway. We would love for employers to do the right thing and hire people with disabilities because they should. But are there incentives available through either the government or through foundations for businesses to do this that you know of?
Um, you know, there probably are. I would tell you that I don't necessarily know if they're actually incentives, but
Mhm.
I do know in the world of independent living, we are working very hard to just have businesses change their culture. And so, you know, the benefits that I see in that is, you know, it's just about changing their culture and bettering their communities. I know that the government, whenever they talk about incentives, they mean well. But I know that, you know, we have identified some, you know, some incentives that definitely are not incentivizing, and actually are, you know, hurtful to the mission of getting people with disabilities in the
Mhm.
workplace. And so, you know, I think the best answer for that is that I think the government may be well intentioned, but again, I think those policies were made without people with disabilities actually at the table talking about how it would impact them. And that is at the
Yeah,
heart of our mission, is making sure
yeah,
that people with disabilities are included in those conversations. Exactly what you just said about the part. No one asked
yeah. They
someone.
forgot to ask the people yeah, who
That's
matter.
right. That's right. That's right. That's right. And that's why, you
And
know,
I know there are. Yeah, I know there are foundations out there that I would imagine do have programs, and I don't know how to identify those. We started finding them when we were trying to raise money for the playground. We found out there are a lot of foundations out there who want to to be a part of what we did. I mean, they were happy that we came to them and said, we need money. They go, oh, please, we would love to give you money because this is exactly what we need to do. So if not the government, I know there are foundations that would certainly, I think, out there be able to provide businesses with some guidance at this. How to find them, I don't know if that's something you can do, but how to find them is out there.
we do have, so each of our 15 centers are very embedded in their communities, and they do have resources within the communities. You know, each of the 15 regions have multiple corporations and companies that work very well with them. I know Dow is one of the sponsors for the series, and the Center for Independent Living, that's in Mid Michigan, which is Disability Network Mid
Mm-hmm.
Michigan. It's located in Midland. Works very closely with the Dow Foundation and the corporation to advance their mission of keeping people employed, and retaining and maintaining their employment. So it is truly one of those things where the Centers for Independent Living are vast resources for pretty much any topic in the disability
Right.
space. And so I would encourage, again, businesses to reach out to them, and, you know, go from there.
I think I found you a customer here. There is a nonprofit community-based organization watching us right now in the audience. They say they are intentional about hiring from the disability community. So they would like to connect with an organization to assist their team to assess the organization and make it more inclusive to the disability community. So there you go. How do they get started?
Thank you. How to get started? We have a website, Disability Network Michigan. It's dnmichigan.org. And from there, you can find the page that has a drop-down menu for the counties. Whatever county you're in, it'll take you to that Center for Independent Living that services the area. So that is a great relationship to start up. There are plenty of people there that can help connect you and get you started on the right path.
That sounds pretty good. Now, we're starting to come a little short on time here, but I do want to kind of get a big picture look at what we're doing here. And you've talked a little bit about what you've seen in the last 3 years. Now, what do you think has been the progress over the last 10, 15 years? And what's the holy grail? What would you like to see this become?
I'll start with the holy grail. The end result would be a fully integrated community where we're not being separated because of well-intentioned people. They didn't want your granddaughter to be hurt by playing with the kids without disabilities. That thought process doesn't even occur. Getting rid of the unconscious bias. There's another term, ableism, that I was not aware of before I started this job. Ableism is when you assume things about someone's ability, where if you look at someone with a disability similar to your granddaughter and assume that she can't do things just based on your knowledge of her having a disability instead of having that conversation. That's ableism. And so ableists speak, they just make assumptions based on someone's disability. So that's the holy grail, where that type of thinking doesn't exist any longer. And I'll throw in there discrimination, obviously. That doesn't exist any longer either. And then the progress that we've had is that we're educating more policymakers to have people sit at the table where these decisions are being made. So one of the things that Disability Network prioritizes as well is working with the Michigan Governor's Office to include more people with disabilities on the boards, councils, and commissions that she appoints. Not just those entities that deal or address address issues or challenges for people with disabilities, but across the board. So we're talking, there's a board for elevator construction, the construction code board, those types of entities need people with disabilities at the table to have the conversations to tell you what you're lacking. What am I missing? Well, you're missing that elevators need to be, they need to have the disability lens in order to be all inclusive. Stairs, parking lots, things like that. But also just, and the governor has probably, I know she has hundreds of these entities, and getting people with disabilities at those tables opens up conversations like this. And, and so just in the last 2 years, she's been doing that, 10, 15 years, I would say, just raising awareness about different disabilities, because again, disability is not all inclusive either. Disability isn't all inclusive, but I think people still have unconscious bias about what disabilities are, which actually flows into the workplace. Business owners don't necessarily know that there are many disabilities that exist, not just the physical ones that you can see, and not just the ones that get the most talked about, cognitive disabilities, things like that. So I think that, that's the 10, 15 year, look back on where we were and where we are now. And then the holy grail is, again, just changing our mindset and how we look at people with disabilities.
Well, we have been talking a lot about the visible disabilities. It's clear you walk in and you see there's something different. You can say, okay, now you either accept it or don't accept it, whatever you're going to do. But there are also disabilities we don't see. And as a business, how do you accommodate having that there? Because I'll give you an example. I saw a customer yelling at at somebody at a store, and they're just yelling like, "Don't you understand? Why don't you understand?" And to me, it was clear that the person they were yelling at has a cognitive disorder that they had just shut down. But to this person, how do you as a business owner understand that this is the situation that's going to be? How do you adapt to that? How do you prepare for that?
Communication. You need to speak with your employee. You need to understand, you know, what it is that they need. The accommodate. I don't want to keep saying accommodations. It's about needs, right? Every employer addresses the needs of every individual employee, no matter what those needs are. So it's no different for someone with an invisible disability, a cognitive disability. When you hire someone, it's your responsibility to address the needs of that individual. It's also the individual's responsibility if they feel they need to address it, then, you know, to make sure that they talk that through with their employer. But there's a lot of fear on both sides. There's a lot of fear of retribution on the person,
Right.
you know, for the person with the disability. And then there's a lot of fear on the employer side of, you know, what is this actually going to mean for my business? So the story that, you know, you just shared is, or the experience you just shared is
Yeah.
just awful. And I think that in particular just boils down to how we all just need to be kinder to each other.
Right. Well, I agree.
Disability or not.
So, well, back to you just started a point there where you said it's a responsibility of the employer to accommodate. Obviously, we believe that's true. But as an employee, if you're afraid of retribution, would you be afraid to disclose that you do have this disability that may not be obvious and evident? Should they do so? And if they don't, as an employer, do you deal with that when you discover it?
And that is always the tricky part of it. And so I think that's why, you know, for me, encouraging the culture to change, encouraging the conversation, and learning how to do that, I think is the step one. You need to learn how to do that. And how do you do that? Again, we've got staff on hand that can walk you through that. Some of the examples are to have an open and honest conversation, or, you know, on your own, learn, you know, talk to somebody that you're comfortable with a disability so that you know how to approach your employee. And responsibility is by no means a legal responsibility in my term. I just mean as a person, as an individual that you're hiring. I would think that it would be your responsibility to get to know that person, you know, especially in small businesses where, you know, you only have a staff of maybe 10 people. You know,
Right.
that is a little bit easier to get to know everybody. But when your culture changes in a bigger business, you'll start to see that those conversations are more organic. But in the meantime, as an employer, I would encourage you to have a conversation with someone that you trust or someone you're comfortable with, and ask questions. If that's your employee, that's great. But we truly do need to open the doors of communication and make it comfortable for everybody. And that was one of the points that I was trying to, you know, hopefully get across today for employers, is that don't be afraid to have a conversation, and don't be afraid to step in it. You know, it's going to be inevitable, because when you don't know about a world, you can't prepare yourself 100%
Right.
about that world until you immerse yourself in it and you experience what somebody else has experienced.
We're kind of in danger today of doing what I think a lot of businesses are afraid of, is we have in kind of a way say, okay, we've got the employees and then we have the other employees, and we lump them together as a group when they really aren't. They are a bunch of individual issues, which oddly enough, as I found it, even in totally abled employees, they're individual issues also. And so everybody's an individual. I think we do need to avoid lumping everybody into, oh, you're the disabled category, you're the able category.
That's right. That's right. And so when you're having events, you know, company-wide events, make sure that if you're having a Christmas party, for example, make sure that you're having it at a location that is accessible to every one of your employees. And that comes from getting to know your employee, having the conversation, creating a culture of belonging. And I do agree with you 100%. you know, to not separate. This is about inclusion. This isn't about
Mhm.
separation. And it's not enough to say, I hired some people with disabilities. You know, the holy grail is to make sure that, disability or not, you hired employees, because as you said, and spot on, every employee has challenges. You know, whether
Mhm.
it's, you know, a parent with daycare challenges, accommodations are being made for that parent, for that employee to, you know, to take care of their stuff. And it's no different with people with disabilities. You know, we're on the right track. I believe that businesses are on the right track. I believe that, you know, the evidence to that is, you know, the series that we're doing right now. The chamber is a huge organization that has members that are business owners. They're, you know, going to see this, and, you know, it's going to spark some interest. And that's what we're about. We're sparking some interest, have that conversation. But again, as you said, bringing people together and not separating them is the group, is the mission, is the goal.
I think virtually everybody in the room here watching today has the same goal. They want to do this. They want to do this right. So kind of in conclusion of our conversation here, take them through a checklist. How do you do it? Where do you start? Where do you go? Where do you end up?
I would say step one, if you're comfortable, please reach out to the Centers for Independent Living in your area. There is staff that can have those conversations with you and assess what you're looking for. Step two, if you're not comfortable having that conversation in person right away, you know, the Job Accommodation Network website is plentiful with resources for employers and individuals. And they take you through not just the legal requirements, but, you know, the above minimum requirements that you can do to make your businesses, you know, meet the culture of belonging. And then, you know, in the meantime, between step one and step two, reach out to people with disabilities, have those conversations, start looking at different ways that you've been focused on one vision where everybody in your world has no disability. That's the best way to put it.
Mhm. Right.
And start kind of looking where you can um, be better. You know, experience things better. Go to your local parks and see who's there. Go to your local restaurants. Restaurants have made, you know, great strides. They're business owners. They've made great strides to accommodate people with disabilities. And I do believe that it's because of the training that they receive. You know, they're conscientious. You know, those are some of the steps that people can do. And I'm also happy to be a resource for business owners if they want to reach out, and I can, you know, direct them to the centers. We have a very strong network of people who are 51% or more people with disabilities
Mhm.
that can talk about that lived experience and can, you know, turn you on to things that, you know, you haven't seen or you haven't experienced or you haven't thought of.
One question came in. I think it's a great way to kind of end this. Okay, so again, everybody in here is interested in doing the right thing. How do you do that without having these dialogues, without suddenly finding yourself accused of discrimination? Because in order to get to the big problem, you've got to single out the problem, and by singling out a problem, now suddenly you're discriminating.
Yeah, that is a tough one. And I know that HR departments are struggling with that. And you know, I don't say this lightly. Make sure you have good legal representation, someone that's well versed in the minimums so that you don't step in it, because that is probably the number one mistake that people make, is that they don't know the legal minimum requirements. That's where you get into legal trouble. And then from there, it's truly about educating yourself and making sure that you're not facing these discriminatory practices and these discriminatory, you know, challenges. I would say discriminatory language is a bit tougher, but again, that's about just exposing yourself to a world that you're not used to. You've got to take the steps to make sure that happens. You know, we have staff on hand. There are plenty of resources out there. You know, through Google, you can do a search, but you know, that is my number one recommendation, is to make sure that you have good legal representation who, and not, and I don't mean to represent you when it's too late, but to,
Yeah.
you know, advise you on
Mhm.
the things to look out for.
Well, history has shown us doing the right thing is never easy, but doing the right thing is the right thing to do. So
That's right. That's right. And again, back to your question about the Holy Grail, I'd like to have a conversation where we don't talk about it's the right thing. I want to talk about that it's, it's happening.
it's the
Um,
thing. It's the
it's
thing to do.
something, right? It's the thing,
Yeah.
right? It is, creating not only a physically safe environment for all of your employees, but also a psychologically safe environment for all of your employees. Mental health resources are an excellent benefit to include when you're trying to recruit people with disabilities. And it's, we're entering into scarier times with workplace, violence, and that isn't
Yeah.
singling out any one group of people, but when you feel safe at work, you thrive, and we can avoid these situations. But I would put in there that mental health resources are definitely something that needs to be talked about as well.
Well, I have hope for the future because I know the kids who know my granddaughter and who spent time in school with her and stuff, they don't see the wheelchair anymore. And I think that's what a lesson for all of us. We just need to stop looking at the wheelchair and start looking at the girl in the wheelchair. I think that's what's happening with my granddaughter. I'm happy to see that.
And absolutely,
Okay.
and that is the goal for business owners. When you stop
Yeah.
looking at the disability and you realize that these employees are going to make your business better, they're going to create a culture that is inclusive. It's going to, again, it's going to be a rippling effect. So I completely agree with you, Stephen, that kids, right? They are
Yeah.
the most
We
innocent.
teach them their
Right.
problems. So.
That's right. We show them the problems. If
Right.
we spent more time listening to them and watching them, we would all be in a better place.
On that note, Terry Langley, Executive Director of Disability Network Michigan, I thank you for your time. I want to turn this back on over now to Amanda Toy. Amanda?
Thank you, Stephen. Gosh, I really liked all of the closing remarks there. I feel like the two of you really hit it home and humanized this important business conversation too. I'm Amanda Toy, the Vice President of Membership and Partnerships here at the Michigan Chamber. And I hope that all of our attendees, and what an overwhelming number of you there were this morning, really found value in both Terry Langley from the Disability Network of Michigan and alongside our moderator, Stephen Clark's information to be very informative and also encouraging. So thank you so much both to Terry and Stephen for leading this conversation today, for bringing this to life. And I particularly enjoy all of the business resources that were included alongside practical feedback like soliciting conversation, giving grace, and keeping this conversation going. A lot of our attendees added that in the chat box today too. And on that note, continuing the conversation, the next Michigan Chamber event, where actually the Disability Network will also be speaking, is an in-person event here in Lansing, just shy of a month away, the Michigan My Business Summit. So I encourage you to take a look at that event on the Michigan Chamber website and register. There is a discount for members, and so many of you on this call are members at the Michigan Chamber, and we thank you for that. But all are welcome to join us at the My Biz Summit to continue to have these HR employment conversations in the disability area, as well as a lot of other information that can be helpful to employers. So definitely check that out. And if you have any questions regarding membership, feel free to contact me, atoy@michamber.com, or you can find my information on the Michigan Chamber website as well. I want to thank our sponsors, because without them in their key role in the series, we would not be able to bring folks together like we are able to do. So thank you so much again to our platinum sponsor, Dow. And thank you so much to our 3 bronze sponsors, CATA, Michigan Bankers Association, and Michigan Bankers Workers' Compensation Fund. We appreciate your support and the important work that you do to help us with the series. Today's event was a great way to kick off the DE&I series here at the Chamber for 2024 programming. There's more to come. So mark your calendar, save the date for June 12th. And that is a topic of cultivating belonging in the workforce, embracing uniqueness and differences. And in this virtual programming, we'll be able to explore best practices for businesses to foster a culture of belonging within their organization. If you are interested, you can literally click on the QR code right now and get registered for free and save the date and get that on your calendar. And then there'll be more information as well in the coming months with some great details on that program. And we hope you can join us for that. And lastly, we want to hear from you in your feedback. So you will be getting a survey in your email inbox for attending today. And we would really like you to take a look at that and give some quick feedback for today's event via that survey, because as we continue to build out programming in this space, we want to make sure it's the best programming for you. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us today at our first D&I series event of 2024, and we hope you all have a wonderful day.